Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick. We're done with the Expectations series. We're on the eve of training camp here, and we're going to talk a little bit about things that are important to watch at this training camp for the Baltimore Ravens, decisions that still need to be made. Here to talk to me about that is Danny Joseph. Danny, how you doing?
Good, Ken. Really excited for just Ravens training camp to start, and it feels like football is back. I saw a couple of videos. The rookies reported. The quarterbacks seem to be back already, and just excited for Ravens football to get back to it and see how this roster completes and fills out.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. When we get into training camp, we'll watch a lot of practice, and then we'll want to see some live fire. Then we'll get that, and we still won't see the whole thing because there'll be a lot of installation of offensive and defensive scheme that happens between the end of that last game and the beginning of the regular season. The preseason is a time to test players rather than test scheme. And so you see a lot of players being put in positions to see what they can accomplish on their own, and not necessarily how the best double teams or the strangest defensive packages they could put on the field can help hold down the enemy. But a great time to talk football anyway, and I'll leave it to you. You're the one who came and proposed this topic. What would you like to start with?
Yeah, I think the most exciting thing coming into training camp, because I think there are some topics that are, we're all excited about, and there are obviously some topics that we're raising an eyebrow towards. I think the thing that we're probably the most excited for is what is this offense going to look like, and what will Lamar Jackson look like in a Todd Monken offense in comparison to the offense that he's played in for the last 5 years under Greg Roman. And I think that Roman has obviously been a very controversial figure amongst Ravens fans, but they are big shoes to fill in terms of measuring statistics. That Roman finished very high yearly in EPA per play, efficiency rating, and he was a great offensive coordinator for the Ravens. There's no debate in that. As frustrating as some could be, Roman was successful, and Monken will need to fill those shoes.
And specifically, Roman was successful with Lamar Jackson.
Yes.
I hope Lamar never. I'm sure he won't, and it doesn't matter whether he does or not in terms of what I hope. But what Roman did to kickstart Lamar Jackson's career is truly fantastic in terms of building the offense around him. The Ravens as a whole, obviously had contributions to that and had to get buy-in from Harbaugh, a willingness to change his whole fourth down strategy in terms of being much more aggressive with that. That's really allowed Lamar to shine in this offense. They've taken advantage of all the gravitational pull he brings to the field. That is one thing that they will probably break down some in Monken's offense. And one of the reasons why I know expectations are sky high, but there's reasons also for a little bit more cautious level of optimism, I think, from the fact that I don't know if Monken's scheme is going to put the focus on that Lamar needs to be shadowed on every play, or you always need to have someone shadowing Lamar on a pass play as opposed to any run play. Does he really need to get accounted for in the same way?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm interested to see what parts they can still bring from the Roman offense, from the run game particularly. I was at the Pittsburgh Ravens game last year in Pittsburgh when Huntley went down, and then they had Anthony Brown on the goal line, and coaches don't win games, but Roman essentially with that run game won that game. And everyone in the stadium knew they were running the ball, and nobody could stop it. And obviously, we are here to talk about what Todd Monken is going to do and what he's going to bring. And hopefully, he does bring elements of that run game into his own scheme. I know some of the things that he's brought or that he's going to bring from Georgia. I'm really excited for in pass game and what he was able to do with two great tight ends at Georgia. And hopefully he can, kind of weave in a multiple amounts of Roman scheme into his own offense.
Yeah, that's going to be one of the big hallmarks. And we've heard some comments in the last few days about there being four wide, and we're taking Lamar back to Louisville and this kind of thing. And I like the idea that you have that available in the bag of tricks. I also like that the Ravens will go to a fair amount of 12 personnel this year, because I think the tight end position is still where a lot of the receiving strength of the team is, with the big three. I think you can do other things still with Ricard. And obviously, I think no matter how you slice it, Ricard's role is going to be reduced this year in Monken's offense. And you're talking about one of the best players at his position, um, that that exists in the league currently. So I am optimistic that what he does to spread the field vertically, maintain a good portion of the field spreading horizontally, is going to be a net positive from Roman. But I don't think it's going to be necessarily an across the board positive. And I do think, one of the important things we haven't talked about yet is how Lamar Jackson adapts to a new offense of this type.
Yeah, exactly. And Lamar has been in the Roman system for 5 years, and this will be really a big test for him. And we've heard, reports from previous players that have come to the Ravens and have said that, Lamar has shown in practice that he can, he can play a more, what people say, approach style offense, but it may be a more pass heavy offense. And Lamar can make the throws and make those, make the reads. And at Louisville, he obviously played in a more pass friendly, heavy scheme than and what a Roman offense would typically look like. But this is going to be a big year for him, because he's asked for it. I think blatantly out, we could read between the lines that he desires to throw more. But he's going to need to show that he can also evolve into a new offense. And you can't pick a better player to put money on that he'll do that. He has shown continuously each offseason that he will put in the work, whether it's working on his accuracy from 2018 to 2019, putting on weight during the 2021 2022 season to try to make sure that he's staying healthy. You can't find a better Raven right now, really, that we'll put in the offseason work to prove and to show that they can win in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. I mean, I've always said that Lamar is the North Star with regard to what you should do with your off-season time if you really want to maximize your football career. He is the player, maybe in the NFL, but definitely for the Ravens probably have ever had, in terms of really maximizing his off-season to that degree. There are other things that are potentially areas of concern. The Ravens have had a hard time maintaining a sufficient pace, which I think is going to be a point of emphasis in the Monken offense. We don't know exactly what it looks like yet, but we assume that pace to the line of scrimmage is going to be increased. I won't say improved, and that there's going to be, I would think, a simplified play call, which involves more of a formation, and perhaps a preliminary set of routes that goes with that. To get teams to the line, to get the Ravens to the line of scrimmage quickly, to make it easier for Lamar to communicate that. And then they're going to have to get to the line of scrimmage and make adjustments as necessary. And a lot of that's going to be on Lamar. It's going to be beyond the time where he could be helped in terms of helmet communication or whatnot. So it's going to have to be Lamar making those choices at the line of scrimmage. And it's easy to say, oh, that'll work better, until but we need to actually see it.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's shown that when they have played with pace, they have been successful. And
Good
a couple of great 2021 games, we saw him play with really great pace. The Colts game is probably the best game he's played as a Raven, in terms of passing efficiency. And the Steelers game, he ran two great hurry up kind of offenses, quick at pace. So yes, absolutely. I think that them getting to the line a little bit easier, them being able to break the huddle, make adjustments at the line. It'll be really interesting to see how Lamar makes those adjustments, and how much he'll grow as the season goes on in that regard. I don't think that this is going to start off as high powered as a normal Ravens season will. I feel like they've come out of the gates pretty strong offensively each year. But I do think that they can finish the season strong.
Okay. Well, it's certainly something that we'll probably have to wait till the season starts to get a really good handle on. The other thing that I'll just say I'm really tremendously concerned about is, will offensive pacing degrade the defense in some way? I mean, the Ravens defense in recent years, particularly in 18, 19, and 23, was largely benefited from the Ravens' ability offensively to slow the game down to exactly what pace they want, run a ton of offensive plays, and allow the defense, long breaks on the field. And they talk about this more, probably I hear it more in the college game. Well, we've got to find a way to keep Penn State's offense off the field so they're not, don't have a worn down defense. If you're Syracuse, and Penn State was the big rival every year. Anyway, if you're going to run more plays, if you're going to run a lot of no huddle, if you're going to run a fast paced offense, your defense will have to pay for the price for it to some degree. Now, if your offense is super efficient, doesn't matter. Your defense will give up some more points. Your defense may even benefit because your offense totally overwhelms and still possesses the ball for a significant amount of time due to the scoring drives, commercials that are involved in the kickoff and whatnot. I guess you have those on punts too, but you may benefit anyway from your team possessing the ball for a long amount of elapsed time as opposed to clock time. But on the other hand, there's more game to be played then by the defense. There's going to be more time left on the clock to be played by the defense, more defensive snaps that have to be done. And when you look at where the Ravens are kind of thin, the defensive line is definitely an area of thinness where if they have a major injury, all of a sudden you're scrambling for defensive line snaps in a way that might be very uncomfortable. At cornerback, the Ravens are very thin. If anything happens, really honestly, they don't have enough talent for the big three cornerback positions right now, in my opinion. But if they have any sort of injury, it gets a lot worse very quickly. And so that's something I would be concerned about. It's just this team has got to be thought of as a complete unit, and part of the value of Roman these last few years, and the value of Roman and Jackson together, has been the ability to keep that defense fresh.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially 2 or 3 years ago, we had some older guys on the team that were when they're on the field and they're playing, they're great. When they are playing, a large percent of snaps, you start to see decline in play. I think a great example of you want to see how a defense can get tired is the Dolphins game week 2 from this previous year, where the offense scored almost too quickly. Like they had the big Lamar run, and then they had the big Bateman play. And by the fourth quarter, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle had run our top two corners out of the game. And watching those breakdowns, watching the defense fatigued and make mistakes, you saw the impact of what it's like to lose starters, but also, how much, a fatigued defense can really just be exposed. So hopefully they can keep that part of Roman's game, especially in ball control moments, whether it's, the end of a half or, a fourth quarter, just getting first downs. I, still believe in this run game, especially with, hopefully that we have a motivated running back, but, that is definitely a key to being a winning team. It's a key part of a winning formula.
I wanted to make two more comments on this pacing issue before we move on. The first was completely agree with your point about pacing. Is Lamar, when asked to do it, has been very good at it. Now, most of the time, Roman's trying to slow roll the offense, and it's very much about grinding out first downs and having long drives, and having, ultimately the ultimate master of offense is points per drive. If you can put up a lot of points per drive, you can make up for any kind of sin in terms of how much you're overworking your defense. So the 2019 Ravens, at 3.08 points per drive with almost none of their cap going to the offense, was an unbelievable, once in a lifetime thing that we'll never experience again, unfortunately. These Lamar era teams are going to have to approach that. My threshold for Lamar in terms of what a great season was, we did the show the other day, hopefully you've listened to it by now, but was 2.65 points per game is what I'd like him to get back to. That would be in the top 5, maybe the top 3 in the league if it happened. And if Lamar Jackson is delivering on that end, then I think it's up to the defense to deal with how much time they have in that regard. But you made a good point about the Colts game where they never got the third down, but there's been a whole bunch of end of half drives where Lamar has been very quick to move down the field, and it hasn't bothered him to to be limited in terms of the amount of time he has and getting the line of scrimmage and making a play. I think he'll adapt fine to a lot of that stuff. I think how they'll really benefit from this, or how they could really benefit from this Mulligan offense, is with a much better distributed football. And I think some of that will take more scheme, not just better pace.
Absolutely. I think that kind of leads just like to the wide receivers. And, I listening to a couple experts like PFF or the athletic shows, they deem the Ravens wide receiver room is just one of the most improved, or if not the most improved unit in the NFL. Part of that is hopefully getting Bateman back healthy, but they have addressed that position in hope to probably become more dualistic and being able to run multiple types of offense and make Lamar's life a little bit easier when it comes to throwing either outside the numbers or hopefully in these must-pass situations, these hurry-up situations. I'm really excited to see how they distribute that ball. I think that Lamar in the past, when he had Hollywood Brown, has gotten a little bit in trouble being a little target happy to certain receivers.
Mm-hmm.
And I will be very interested to see, can you keep Odell Beckham, can you keep Rashad Bateman, and can you complete Zay Flowers, all three of them happy in this offense? I don't think you would have been able to do that if Greg Roman was the offensive coordinator still. Just given the amount of times they pass, and then Mark Andrews is still on the team. I'm very curious to see how distributing the ball will be able to keep those players engaged and happy, and make them feel like they're part of the winning formula or whatever wide receivers look for.
Okay, let's talk about that for a minute, because I think there's some unpacking deserved. Why should I care that Odell Beckham or Nelson Aguilar in particular, who are both 1-year rentals, and they have void years at the end of the contract, they're here for 1 year or one and done. Why should I care that either of those guys are unhappy with their target share if the Ravens are winning and the passing offense is generally effective?
That's a great point. And I mean, if you look around the league and the wide receivers that have become unhappy or have demanded trades or seek to trade, a lot of the times they kind of are on winning teams. Like Tyreek Hill, the Chiefs have been one of the best teams in football over the past 5 years. Stephon Diggs, with all of his unhappiness this offseason. The Bills have been to the AFC divisional round for the past 2 years, and they made the AFC title game. Time and time again, we've seen Devontae Adams, right? Like they've made the NFC title game and divisional round. We've seen these receivers who are unhappy in high target shares, then request to be traded. So it's a great point. And it's not like they're cornerstone players or a franchise on top of all that. And to be completely honest, like I'm happy that Odell Beckham is on our football team, but I would be much more excited if Zay Flowers is our leading receiver, or Rashad Bateman, because those can become pillars of a franchise, and you can keep them contractually cheaper for 3 or 4 more years. So I guess the short answer to your question is, I mean, I could care less about what those two say. If it's going to impact the locker room, they're not going to survive on a John Harbaugh football team. They're not going to be around for very much longer. So yeah, that's the short answer to your question of we don't need to be super concerned to keep them happy. It just is like a good depth piece, really, because it based on a position where we've had trouble with guys staying healthy the whole year.
We certainly have, and these are veteran wide receivers, much in the mold of a lot of the guys they've signed over the years. They might represent, in terms of Beckham in particularly, the top end of that mold. So we hope Beckham becomes Bolden. I don't think it's likely, but we hope Beckham becomes Bolden. I don't know who we hope Aguilar becomes, but not Frank Sanders or even Demarcus Robinson.
Jacoby Jones.
Yeah, there you go. Jacoby Jones would be good. But we hope for the best, certainly for both of them. And I really hope that neither of them ends up being a distraction. In fact, I hope just the opposite, because Beckham in particular is one of the great route runners the National Football League has had over the last decade. He has got so much to impart to a player like Zay Flowers, to even a player like Bateman, who's an outstanding route runner himself, and really probably was the best of his entire class coming out. He has things to learn from Beckham. In terms of how he can do differently, how he can throw a move at the top of the stem, all of the things that Beckham has made Beckham's NFL career great, particularly at the outset. But boy, if all of a sudden he's upset because he's getting 3 targets a game, I am not going to have a lot of patience for that personally. I'm sure I'll be talking about it on the show if it happens, and particularly if the Ravens have a 9-3 record or something at the time, and he's having that complaint. I do believe that was part of the reason why Marquise Brown had to go. He basically said, this offense just isn't for me, and it wasn't running through him. If you're Marquise Brown, you want to make the best decision for yourself. They always say for their family, but really for himself. You want to maximize your position in an offense such that you can make as much money as possible in the NFL. And I think that's really what it came down to in him leaving this team. And there's no bones about where Odell Beckham is at this point in his career. The Ravens have given him a chance. Not only giving him the chance, they're overpaying him for that chance in this 1-year thing because Lamar Jackson wanted him. In the same vein, they're giving Aguilar a chance, and they really have invested in the possibility of him delivering something in this year because they've given up, in addition to the money they gave him, an extra 6th-round draft pick as a compensatory loss offset. So I'm really, Aguilar doesn't get that in terms of dollars, but they're investing in him to do this. Both these guys need to take this as if it was their 4th year in the league. Hopefully deliver on a big season, and I wish them the best in future endeavors, as we see in any email when a person leaves the company, right? You hope for their best with their next organization.
Yeah, absolutely. Beckham certainly, if we were talking about 2017, 2018 Odell Beckham, it would be a completely different conversation. His contract certainly shows that he'll be a big part of this offense. The 1-year rental that the Ravens have given him, they are overpaying him. There's no debate in that. You're paying for a guy who has not played football in a year, coming off his 2nd ACL injury, who was playing great football for the Rams in the playoffs, but was not playing great football prior to that. And has a lot of measurements and statistics that he is declining. Having said that, if he can take on a leadership role where he is guiding a Rashad Bateman, guiding a Zay Flowers, and all the things that they can work on the field, then talking about maybe some of the things that he regrets, off the field, in terms of maybe the way that he is, presented himself in the media or has handled certain difficult situations on a team.
Yeah,
that's really valuable, and that's how he can get another contract for another team.
Did you ever see the movie? That's a Bernie Mac movie, Mr. 3000?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So it's very much, you hope that he can, relate his own experiences as a cautionary tale, the way that worked out there, and to help some players through some difficult times. It'd be great if Odell Beckham was a guy they just naturally texted first when they had some sort of a problem. And it'd be really great if Odell Beckham is a very natural teacher on field at practice, the way we saw from Justin Houston last year. If he's that, a significant chunk of that salary has paid off for the Ravens in not on field play.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think we've already seen the start of it with working on the offseason with Lamar and Zay Flowers, and
Yep.
And hopefully, as Bateman is working back through this foot injury, he has a veteran that can, tell him, hey, be patient. We don't need you for week 1. If you need more time, we need you for, this stretch in the regular season. Just keep your head up. Little things like that, having a guy in the locker room that, has your back, I think can go a real way, and maybe something that we as fans can sometimes undervalue, because we do see it on the defensive side of the ball for the Ravens, especially having the old like grizzled veterans who can bring the young guys along.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's move on. Let's say we've spent some time on the wide receivers. We spent some time on Lamar. Cornerback, a significant depth issue here still for the Ravens right now, and to me, it's one of the biggest problems.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is probably I would give this as the biggest need slightly than edge. Um, I do assume the Ravens will bring in a veteran edge player or defensive lineman. But corner is a place where I feel like they are overflowing with the amount of depth pieces, and they don't necessarily have an answer. I think they're hoping that one of these guys can really develop, and they're hoping that one of them can come in and contribute. But they're all kind of the same. So that's kind of how I'm looking at that right now.
Very difficult. They're a very difficult sorting problem, and they
Yes.
are mostly outside corners we're talking about. So we talk about the big four who are in the competition right away. I hope I won't forget one because I always manage to. It's Kelly, Worley, Mullen, and Stevens be a fourth. He's really at safety right now.
Armour Davis.
Armour Davis. It's the one. Okay, so JAD. So you potentially have five guys. And it's interesting that the very first guy they take out of the group is a guy who was playing pretty decently at the end of last year, who is Stevens. Mm-hmm. But they're saying safety, and they do need more depth at safety as well. So that's a potential, problem, but also a potential area where they have a flexible piece there. And then the outside corner problem isn't the only one; it's the slot corner problem as well. Their number one slot corner right now is Pepe Williams. The only other guy who really makes sense as a slot corner among the defensive backs on the roster now is Ardarius Washington entering year 3. And then if you want to make the commitment to it, of course, you can play your ace of trumps there and put Kyle Hamilton in the slot. And then you're taking him away from someplace else. And I've made the point on other shows that the decision on where Kyle Hamilton goes needs to drive how they form the defense and treat the corner room. They need to figure out where will he be a superstar, put him there, and try and let him play only that position. And what I don't mean that he can't come up and cover a tight end and man in the base defense, and that maybe he stays on the back end anytime the nickel is on with 5 defensive backs. I'm not talking about like minor changes in responsibility on a by play level. I'm just talking about his base position is going to be either strong safety or it's going to be slot corner. Figure out which, and then build the rest of your defense around that.
Absolutely. And it needs to be based on where is he going to play the best, and what will be the best for his career. I think we've seen a few times with players' development when you no matter how talented they are, right? If you swing them back and forth from position to role, it does impact their development. It does impact their ability to just be consistent on the field. Odafe Owe, I think we'll talk about later, but
absolutely
great example of a really talented player who showed a ton of promise his rookie year, and his second year it was a different telltale.
They're at risk of that with Brandon Stevens right now. Kamalai Correa was one. They moved inside and outside linebacker. And Michael Orr would be another one between left tackle and right tackle. I think they ruined him with that, but or he ruined himself because he really wanted to play left tackle. There are those, and occasionally though with a superstar player, and I think Hamilton honestly fits into this category. You can move them around, and it doesn't really matter where they're playing. They're still freaking great. And the big one is Marshall Yanda. He's got a left shoulder injury, so he goes to play left guard, so his inside shoulder can still be a strong shoulder. And that was just a remarkable thing. They needed him to play right tackle. He's kind of a short arm guy anyway. No problem. I'll move to right tackle and have a near Pro Bowl season in 2010. Just what they were able to do with him was truly remarkable, what he was able to do in terms of versatility. But I think it's the guy who's the marginal NFL talent. More true of Orr and Stevens and guys like that it's you're running a lot more risk moving them around.
Yeah, absolutely. I fully believe that Hamilton can really be the superstar. I mean, the last 3 or 4 years, this defense has kind of been built around Marlon Humphrey. And I think 2 or 3 years from now, we'll be saying that the defense is built around
Hamilton.
Kyle Hamilton.
Mm-hmm.
And slot corner will be, I think, probably the biggest decision they'll make for their defense, and how their defense will be outlined, and who will play where. And it's driving by what they decide to do with Kyle Hamilton. If they value slot corner that much, if they value that it is a essential position and he is so elite at it that we can move him around as a chess piece there, they better have conviction doing that, and he better be on board with it too.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to see him see what his potential is at the safety role, but I do trust that they are going to make that decision based on what Hamilton's strengths are, not sacrifice any development or production, possibly elsewhere.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you, and I don't even think that's the only player that they can make an extraordinary move, because they have done it before with moving Marlon Humphrey to the slot, and with a large number of outside corners they have, it is possible that he would end up there at some point this season if it's just not working out for one or more slot corners, including Pepe, that they start the season with there. Looking at Hamilton's last season, this is the last point I'll make on this topic, is that the amount of growth we saw in him in terms of knowing where he's supposed to be is extremely promising for his ability to be able to handle multiple positions, and maybe even multiple positions at the same time. But he certainly looked quite lost in that Week 2 Miami game, when he was just in the wrong position relative to the defense. I just, for whatever reason, and in large part, it's his play at both slots as the year progressed. I think he's earned our trust to play both those positions, where I couldn't really say the same thing about Brandon Stevens at this point, even though he could potentially play both of those same positions.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Hamilton certainly his just this development and knowing where to be, and then allowing the greatest part of his game, his instincts and his physicality, to take over, was really just really important for the defense. One of the things that I was nervous when he started playing the slot role was, well, how would he do against a shifty receiver, like a crafty route runner? And he's really able to use his size and his instincts on the ball to make up for just the fact that he's bigger than a lot of the people that would play a slot receiver. So super excited to see what he where they align him, and then that cornerback competition should be I think that a lot will tell in the preseason games, and I'm interested to see who is the leader of the clubhouse, and who's playing the most amount of snaps, and also how loyal they'll be to some of their draft picks. I think that Armour Davis, I think he, if I remember correctly, last camp he was performing pretty well, but he just hasn't been on the field. And
I don't think I'm trying to think of how much he actually played in the preseason. I may have it wrong, but I didn't remember him having a big preseason role last year.
Yeah. I remember him. I think he was hurt during a few of the preseason games. Though some of those stock up, stock down articles, it seemed like he had been practicing well. But obviously the games are the most telling. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see which one of those guys, if one of them can make a jump during practice. Worley last year, the Bengals game, if I remember correctly,
Yep.
Played pretty well. So maybe he can find a role in the defense, or as you said, Darius Washington in the slot role. I would love to see Marlon Humphrey stay on the outside, but we'll see how it plays out, and which corners can take the lead there.
Fair enough. Let's kind of move on and keep the show going here. What's your next topic? I'll bring up one if you want to.
Yeah. My next topic is what the injuries, contracts, and unhappiness, and seeing how the mentality of a few of these players can maybe influence their practice or what their status is. I think the three that jumped out to me were Dobbins with a possible contract dispute, Bateman coming off of his foot injury, and Queen with the drafting of Trenton Simpson and whether that unhappiness has impacted any of his motivation going into the season. It seemed like he said all great things at mini camp. He tended, and I think that he knows what's at stake. That if he has a big year next to Roquan Smith, what that can mean to him financially. But it's something going into training camp, I think, that's worth paying attention to. And yeah, especially after last week, what Dobbins' status will be at the first couple, first practice will be interesting.
Yeah, all of those, and you can throw Beckham in there. One other is Zeitler, in terms of a guy who definitely wants a new contract. But the Ravens are in a position, and I think they should just go with the party line to everybody, because it's not untrue. It's basically, with Lamar Jackson's second contract here, we just do not have room for as many long-term contracts. So there's not anybody who would currently like to be extended early. Do we have an easy path to that? Now, it doesn't mean we won't absolutely won't do it, but it means we have to be extremely judicious with every dollar we spend. I don't know if the players respect that or not. I mean, didn't seem like Matthew Judon, after he left the Ravens, really understood it, because he basically has beaten on the Ravens in the press about the Ravens not signing their players. Well, guess what? If you draft well, you're forced into continual heartbreaking decisions of letting your great players move on. But the alternative, drafting crappily and not having to make those decisions and oversigning your marginal players, is a hell of a lot worse. So respectfully, with Matthew Judon, mind your own business and go make as much money as you can somewhere else. Frankly, he's a great player. He was a great player for the Ravens. He's certainly been a great player for the Patriots, and I'm happy for him. That's it. But the guys who talk about not wanting to sign anybody coming off their first contract, it's too difficult to listen to sometimes about this. And Zeitler is a professional. I don't think he'll allow that to affect his play in any way. Queen and Dobbins are fourth-year players, and they just got to understand what's going on. The same goes for Broderick Washington and Justin Madubuike, by the way. They probably want contract extensions, both of them. It would not surprise me if the Ravens have tried to offer those contracts, but it's going to be a right player, right place deal in either case, that there's got to be a divisible benefit on the table. In the case of Dobbins, I don't think he's interested in divisible benefit, honestly. I think he wants a big contract, and he wants it now. That's just the impression I get from the amount he's willing to already gripe about it, is that he wants the security now. If that's true, you typically have to give up something to get that. And if your value a year from now with a 900-yard season is going to be $18 million over 3 years, then you might have to take $14 million over 3 years right now in order to guarantee yourself that security, because you don't have a 100% chance of a 900-yard season. So that's a place where I don't think players always can do it. But the whole notion of betting on yourself is saying, effectively, I'm betting I won't get injured and that my productivity can still stay up in this new system.
Yeah, and that draft class, the 2020 class, is the one that's coming up, and all of them are coming up with Queen's fifth year being declined. Mm-hmm. Dobbins has certainly made the most waves in terms of his unhappiness. And I honestly, I don't think that he's the first priority that the Ravens want to resign. He's a great player. He's a runs great running back. He runs hard and it's lovable by the fans. And I would not mind if they were able to find some type of deal. But the fact is that when you pay a quarterback as much money as you're paying Lamar Jackson, and your corner pieces are Marlon Humphrey, Roquan Smith, Marcus Williams, Ronnie Stanley, there's
Mark
only
Andrews.
so many. Yeah, Mark Andrews. There's only so much money that you can throw around, and they have make no bones, they have chosen those 6 guys. Those are their key pieces. There's not a lot of. I don't think there's another big contract that they can really give out right now. Those are the 6 guys that they've been on, and you can debate whether those are the 6 that you wanted. I would argue that they've gotten pretty darn good value, and we'll see how Roquan and the Marcus Williams contracts come out. But they've picked 6 great guys in my opinion,
Yeah.
and they're not in a position over the next 3 years to be handing out contract extensions like they were in 2019 or 2020.
Yeah. It's the 2018 draft is now 2 years in the rear window, but it's also something to look at in terms of this 2020 draft. Good draft in 2020. They got clearly a lot of players that they really like out of the deal. 2018 is one of the greatest, well, it's the greatest draft in franchise history, probably. 1996 being the competitor.
Right.
But in 2018, getting all of the talent they did, they had to basically dismantle that draft one piece at a time. And they unfortunately lost Zach Sealer because they just didn't have room for him on the roster, which is an unbelievable loss to the practice squad to lose a player that good. And they traded Kenny Young, and they traded Hayden Hurst after 2 years and got real value for him, which I thought was good.
Yeah.
They traded Orlando Brown for his 4th year, and I thought they got very good value for him as well, even though, boy, would they love to have had Orlando Brown in 2021.
Yeah.
They had to unravel that entire draft other than keeping one cornerstone player for it. And I think you have to really credit DaCosta with having the nuts to trade these guys in year 4 when they just can't possibly fit into the team's long-term plans. And unfortunately, Queen is the primary guy right there. I think they need Dobbins too much this year to consider trading him, but Queen, if they could get something for him, I think is still on the potentially on the block for this year. And love to see him play here too, have a big year, but they have the backup already in place in Simpson.
Absolutely, and if you're trying to win the Super Bowl this year, you cannot trade J.K. Dobbins.
Right,
you're not going to get good enough value. No team. I don't know what even draft compensation he would fetch, given what the running back market has been. And how many veterans you can sign for a vet minimum. Dobbins is way too important to the winning formula. The 2 most valuable ones to this team this year, though, are Broderick Washington and Justin Madubuike. Given that the defensive line is so is just so thin and maybe a little unproven. Those 2, I think that they have probably much more interest in extending one of them on a deal. But yeah, Queen, again, if you're trying to win the Super Bowl, is it worth getting whatever compensation that you can get from him? That's I guess we'll find out. But when you draft really well and you are able to build starters and develop people, you have to lose some. And you also have to deal with probably players being unhappy about what their contracts and what their extensions possibilities could look like.
Right.
So yeah, 2020 draft class was a solid one. I think we've gotten some good value from those guys, and I do think that they'll be playing the comp pick game next summer with some of them and trying to replenish and restock.
It would be hard for them to miss on a big exchange of players for comp picks next year because of how many people they have entering free agency. And they did, I thought, remarkably well, largely because of the Josh Oliver signing was much higher than expected, but then they gave that away, of course, when they signed Aguilar, which was a little bit frustrating.
Yeah.
Let's move on to one of the big battles, because I think we need to discuss this for sure, which is the left guard battle. We're going to learn a lot in training camp about what's going on with that. And we don't actually have to wait for the preseason games to start to understand how the Ravens totem pole at left guard is looking. And there will also be some evidence probably on positional versatility with these guys I want to talk about. But who would you like to start with on the left guard position?
Yeah, I think the leader in the clubhouse, from what the mini camp reports were saying, although we're still so early, I don't think there is a leader, is John Simpson. And he was a starter for the Raiders the entire 2021 season. Year they made the playoffs, the year they lost Gruden, and the team kind of still was able to get a playoff berth. Last year was benched in week 2 for the Raiders, and then released, which seemed like a surprising move. And the Ravens picked him up kind of late last year, right, and stashed him, which I thought was an interesting little gamble. I think if you're looking at organizations around the NFL right now, I think the Raiders are how they're being run. If you were going to take advantage of maybe a poorly run team and getting rid of a possible neutral starter, that's certainly one I would bet on. So I did think that it was a fine move picking him up and seeing if he can make the roster and contribute. But I certainly don't feel comfortable, maybe, with him being the starter right off the bat.
Okay, so John Simpson is a damaged property, and
Yeah.
there's reasons why. I mean, obviously playing in Las Vegas, not an ideal situation with the dysfunction of the organization generally, but he's played 1,545 NFL snaps and had 17 penalties. That's an absurd number, and that part is primarily on him. Now, there's also the severity of the penalties. 2 false starts, 13 holding calls, and 2 personal fouls. You'd hope for a bunch of false starts in there, and maybe you could correct it and whatnot. Holding penalties can be a little more difficult because there's some that can be prevented by just knowing when to release on if the player gets outside your frame, and there's some that can't be prevented because you're getting beat so badly on the play you have to basically tackle somebody who's trying to get down your quarterback. So the Ravens have looked at this, and I trust their judgment in terms of what player they can rehabilitate, and they think they can rehabilitate on the offensive line because they've been so good at it over the years in terms of drafting marginal offensive line talent and making something out of it, and also in reclaiming offensive line talent that comes off other teams' scrap heaps. Actually been less good at that. But Simpson is built exactly like a guard. You draw him up on the board. And not only that, and here's the interesting thing about Simpson, I don't think anybody's talking about yet, really. He's 6'4", 321, and he has 34 and an 1/8 inch arms. I believe it's slightly over 34 inches. I'm wondering if the Ravens don't see him as a potential backup at left tackle.
That's a very good point. Or at least have the versatility to do both.
Yes.
Yeah. And I also don't think it's now that you mentioned that, I wonder if they see him in combination with Linderbaum, and the size of Simpson being able to at least play well with what Linderbaum may lack, and those two complementing each other a little bit more. Adding some size in the middle, I think would be really beneficial to Linderbaum's play, especially he's gonna have a little bit of a different role this year with pass blocking more.
Well, completely agree for starters. And they have 5 guys potentially in the competition, and Patrick McCary's name has been mentioned. I don't honestly believe they're going to try and start him at left guard with the need to have him as a potential backup center or potential backup left tackle. I think it's more likely you keep him as your 6th man. So he's your James Worthy. You don't try and get him in the starting lineup, and then it allows you to make a 1-for-1 substitution and maintain as much line continuity as you can. But the other 4 guys they have in this competition are some of the biggest men who play professional football today. And John Simpson is the small one of the group. Yeah. Saleh is enormous. Ben Cleveland is a mountain of a man. And then the other guy is Daniel Faalele, who's moving from right tackle and, is one of the heaviest men ever to play the game, heaviest and tallest ever to play the game. So the Ravens are certainly going with size. And I think you're 100% right in terms of the need to put a big body, or the value of putting a big body next to Linderbaum, should not be undersold. He's having a very small guy there. You want 2 things. You want a big body next to him for combination blocks, and to use that alternate body style to get the quickness and power combination you want. So that's part of it. And honestly, that's probably about 25% of the importance. The 75% factor is that you need a guy who's a good pass blocker there. They had Ben Powers, and Ben Powers as a pass blocker did a lot to cover for Linderbaum in his first year. His weakness is pass blocking, and his weakness is pass blocking for no secret reason. It's because of his size and length. And they'll need to get a guy next to him who can help overcompensate and protect that A gap more than a left guard normally would. So they really need a good pass blocker there. And that I'm less clear of who the guy is among those 4 who might be the correct choice.
Yeah, absolutely. You've seen other teams do that with the Eagles with Kelsey. They've always had a kind of a giant next to him, Brandon Brooks, and I like with left guard. I think the other guy, like the two other guys, or two of the three other guys you mentioned, Ben Cleveland is, I think, going to be a very interesting case study, because I don't know if he doesn't come in this training camp, in shape or as motivated. I don't know what exactly what's been going wrong for him. I don't know how much more time he has on his Ravens clock, and how much patience they have for him. What's frustrating is when he's been in NFL games, he's played pretty well. In terms of your scoring system, what have you seen from Cleveland when he has kind of jumped in?
This last year, not so great. But he had a game against Pittsburgh where you kind of got to see a little bit of the things in terms of power, and then he made a couple pass blocking errors. But he definitely he got teed up on some combination blocks where he absolutely put the guy into next week, and we finally got to see some of the amazing power of Ben Cleveland in play. And I think the year before he had some up and down, but there was enough in his rookie play to say, yeah, this is a guy that you could see signs or you could see hope for growth from. So I think, now it's year 3. You mentioned, sands in the hourglass are running pretty quickly. And he's almost out of option value. When year 4 hits, he's really completely out of option value. And you need to figure out, do we have a player or not? And honestly, they should have figured this out in year 2, even if they weren't happy with him. They should have figured out, do we have somebody who we really like? And Harbaugh would probably tell you they think they know from practice whether they can trust the guy or not. And he didn't play or rotate with Powers anyway, in part because Powers was having a great year, but also because he was still in the doghouse from showing up out of shape and whatnot. Now, reports from minicamp that I've heard are that he's in outstanding shape this year. So I hope that ends up being true when I'm there next week, and we get to see a player who is exactly who the Ravens expected him to be when they drafted him.
Yeah, absolutely. I know during minicamp they were also testing him out at tackle a little bit, so maybe they're testing a little bit of his versatility. That's terrific news then, if he's in shape and motivated to get that starting role. I probably feel, if he is able to, like somehow find his potential or be the player that we want him to be, that would probably be my ideal choice to be the starting left guard. It's obviously exciting that if you find a diamond in the rough like Salah in the 6th round, like if he's able to come in and be the starter. But you can't really depend on that. And it seems like all reports that Salah has been pretty solid as he started. Salah during college played a lot of tackle. And one of the big things, played a lot of right tackle. And from reading on him, they said, well, he probably lacks a lot of the athleticism to be an NFL tackle. Seeing more of him inside, and it's interesting. It seems like the Ravens obviously completely believe in that, but also another versatility piece for tackle depth. I'm excited to see how that battle shakes out, and who is kind of jumping up the rankings as training camp's going on.
So I maybe have a slightly different take on what the ideal outcome is, but I'll give you mine as I would see it right now. I think the ideal guy to win the job is Salah, and the reasons are fairly obvious. That he's a rookie, and so the years of team control. Sure. Obviously, if you know who that guy is as a rookie, you've really got a big win on your hand. So that he'd be the ideal guy. Now that said, I think it's quite possible that Salah is not quite ready in terms of his needs to get stronger. May need to learn more about the footwork of the guard position and whatnot. My number 2 guy would probably be Cleveland, just because of the 2 years of team control left. He's been a pretty good pass blocker. And my number 3 guy would be Simpson for multiple reasons. Number 1 is that he's had this big penalty problem. And I hope the Ravens get over it, but I'm not convinced they will be able to. But let's say they are. Let's say they know exactly what the Orioles have known with some of their recent guys like Hicks and who's the other one?
O'Hearn?
I'm sorry, say again?
Brian O'Hearn?
Well, Ryan O'Hearn is a good one. Yeah. So
Yeah.
so they've signed a couple of guys who hadn't hit anywhere else in years, and they all of a sudden are getting production out of them. The reliever they just got from Oakland, Fujinami.
Oh, yeah.
He is another guy where the Ravens may really, so the Orioles may really have it figured out. So if the Ravens, who are offensive line whisperers, think they can fix Simpson, fantastic, and he could really be the guy. He's certainly built for the position. I'd be even more happy if they said John Simpson is too valuable to us as a backup tackle for us to even have him playing guard. So if they'd said that about Tyree Phillips early, maybe Tyree Phillips' whole career trajectory would have been different with the Ravens because they might have been able to use him at tackle in 21. But if for whatever reason they decide that John Simpson is the guy they want at backup tackle, I think that would be fantastic. And also, when you look at it, Simpson's a one-year rental. They could re-sign him during the year, but if they really need him to play left tackle, he's an outstanding option for that if he can handle it. And you do have other options at left guard that might work. So, probably that's my 1, 2, 3 is Saleh, Cleveland, Simpson. I don't think Faalele is going to be the guy. I think he's probably got a year developmentally wherever he's going to play in the NFL. And I hope the Ravens can find a way to keep him around, but I'm not even 100% sure that that's going to be an easy thing to do.
Yeah, it'll be hard to keep a lot of all these pieces. And I mean, one of the sneaky things about Simpson is that if Jody can kind of work his magic, he can now enter the comp pick formula as well when he hits free agency next offseason. I don't know if they're going to be able to pull off a Ben Powers 4th rounder again, but you never really know with the way that the Ravens can churn out some offensive linemen.
Well, there is a limit of 4, a net of 4, and I think the Ravens are already going to be pushing that.
Yeah.
They'll sign some free agents, but a lot of the free agents they have to sign this next offseason will be out of the bargain bin, out of necessity. So they won't be early guys they sign. They'll be guys that they sign after the draft and don't count against the comp formula. So the guy, but I mean, you look down the whole list of free agents they have with Dobbins and Edwards and Queen and Zeitler and all. I mean, this should be a high set of net value comp picks that they recover in 25.
Yeah, and I don't know the rules on do you keep your 4 highest comp picks. I'm sure that's probably the rule. But it would be it's interesting case study to see maybe are they looking towards drafts as almost we're going to have these big drafts like the 2022 draft class, the 2020 draft class, the 2018, almost have those every 1 or 2 or 3 years to stock the cupboard of roster spots. That'd be an interesting way to see like how you analyze team building, and then also how you're able to like now to stay a step ahead in the comp pick formula that you have so many free agents from draft classes, these massive classes. Are you able to make more, get more from the comp picks, just the fact of quantity, because you other teams have figured out the comp pick formula and have almost caught up to the Ravens with their strategy. Is this now the next step? But that's a discussion for a different day.
That is a very interesting discussion, by the way. I like the thought that went into that in terms of is there some on again, off again value where you can increase your number of picks in a year and really take advantage of the comp formula.
Yeah.
So it's a good idea.
Yeah.
Anyway,
what's your next topic? No, what's your next topic?
How about the pass rush? Because we haven't really talked about that. You mentioned it as one of the big needs right off. I think, I'll just say I think the Ravens need is primarily at Sam linebacker right now, which limits a lot of the potential moves they can make.
Completely agree, because you drafted Ojabo in the 2nd round last year, the 45th pick, and that's a pretty valuable pick. And to use that pick on a guy who you knew wasn't going to give you like any type of production year 1, you better play him year 2. You better give him a chance. And last year when they kind of hit a point of, oh my God, we have nobody to play at outside linebacker, and they're running Owe into the ground, and Pierre-Paul is playing like 60 snaps a game. Very quickly towards the end of the season, like all of them were healthy. Like none of them were hurt. Like, because when Bowser came back, they had Bowser, Houston, Pierre-Paul, Owe, and Ojabo just kind of waiting in the wings, maybe for his chance. And some of them were too important to the team to take off the field. And now I think you have a big decision of, well, okay, if we're going to make one move at outside linebacker, is it in our best interest to bring in Justin Houston, or is it to find a guy that can play Sam? And Sam linebacker position for the Ravens is extremely important. And I think that, if you look back into, pre-Tyus Bowser last season, when Tyus Bowser came back, that'll give you a great idea of how important that position is to the defense. So, yeah, I mean, would you be happier if they were to bring in a veteran, or are you looking for who in camp, or what outside free agent can fill that same role?
So, yeah, I'm not sure if they have the guy on the roster anymore. Dalen Hayes was supposed to be him, and he was released and is obviously now gone. And Vince Beagle was supposed to be kind of a stopgap player at the position last camp, and he got hurt as well. So unfortunate set of circumstances, really left him shorthanded in 22. Got a little bit of saltiness from Harbaugh in terms of his reaction at the podium to, whether or not outside linebackers can play Sam or rush. And I forget exactly his words. I don't want to say it, but he was basically trying to gloss over it and say they can play either. And I wholeheartedly disagree with that. I don't think he even believes it. I think he said it because he wanted to get past the discussion, but I wholeheartedly disagree with that. The Sam linebacker is absolutely the key to the Ravens having a pass rush where they can bring anybody. So if you have Bowser, he's an enormous chess piece on the field. You can move him, play a short zone to cover a flat route, to drop and potentially cover a tight end, drag a seam, whatever it might be. He can do very effectively, and it gives your pass rush an extra opportunity to create that first pressure on the quarterback, which usually leads to a second man sack. So get the slot rushing, get inside linebacker rushing. It's just that we don't know who's coming is largely dependent on having a Sam linebacker who can drop.
Yeah, especially, I mean, like that seems to be McDonald's simulated pressure and not knowing who's coming is one of McDonald's key tenets to his defense,
as opposed to numbers, right? You're talking about
as opposed to just bringing 6. And he there are some great videos for anyone who wants to understand McDonald's defense. There's some great videos on YouTube from the Ringer, Ben Solak, who analyzed the beginning or when Roquan Smith came to the Ravens and when how their defense changed, but also how they played Cincinnati. There's a great video of what simulated pressure looks like. But that can't happen unless they have a Sam linebacker. And I think that's like an interesting thing going into training camp, because I don't know who's on the roster who can do that. And I really hope that it's not Owe. And right. I think that's what I am the most concerned about, because I would love to see Owe in a rush role and not going back and forth and swinging that development. I don't think Owe is as special as a player as you said, Hamilton before, who can do both those things. And I think that did hurt him last season when they were bringing him back and forth. And we saw him come on at the end. He was playing very well. But I personally am a little concerned that they think it's Owe, and I really hope that it's not.
Yeah, I'm extremely bullish on Owe this year, because I think working with Chuck Smith, he'll have a good chance to not only get into some compound moves, which I think Chuck Smith is well known for, but also hopefully they'll find ways to train him that will improve his get off and make him more of a threat to that left tackle, which will then make the left tackle overreact to the first move he makes. And that's when a guy like Chuck Smith can get in there and say, okay, here's the compound move that's going to work here, spin move, Euro step, whatever. But if you show him this, he can't help but overreact to it to the outside, and you'll beat him. I love the idea of Owe staying over there, and I really like the idea of trying to keep him fresh as well. So using him more on passing downs. And it's unfortunate. It's not unfortunate. It's good that he's a good run defender, or can be, but it's even more important by orders of magnitude that he brings the Ravens pass rush, because they have other guys who can play some run defense, and they can get other guys who can play some run defense. But what you can't do is degrade who he is as a pass rusher by asking him to play either too much or out of position. And I think kind of both of those things happened in 22.
Yeah, and it was disappointing because during preseason last year, it seemed like he was unblockable and was terrific in training camp. But yeah, I'm excited to hear you're bullish on him, and I think the addition of Chuck Smith too, having him in the defense with those two young guys will be great. And the effects of Justin Houston, whether they bring him back or not, in terms of working on their their craft and their moves. And it seems like he really had a great impression on Owe and hopefully Ojabo as well. But they're certainly banking on a lot with Bowser, Ojabo, and Owe. I think that it's okay. I do anticipate that they'll add another, and I'll be interested to see maybe if there's a guy coming up the ranks yet that we don't know that can maybe play a backup Sam. I think Moon is still on the roster. I'm not sure if he really plays that Sam role, what he did at training camp or last year, but somebody hopefully can fill that need, or they bring in somebody that fills that need, and it's not Owe or Ojabo.
Right. Well, Malik Ham is on the roster, who's a possibility, I suppose. He's one that is pointed to sometimes. I'm trying to think if there's anybody we haven't talked about in that group. The only other guy I see the name that is one I don't know is Kelly Sanders, who's out of UAB. So I guess he's somebody worth taking a look at. His size and length would tell me. I'm sorry, his size would tell me he possibly could be a Sam at 6'4", 246.
Yeah.
So we'll take a look. It'll be fun to see some of these guys. None of them really are easy to identify coming out of school as Sam linebackers, at least not to me, because they rush the passer all the time. They're too valuable in that role to be taken out of it. And you end up guessing about who the good guys are. And there's probably, one or two per class that have even done it enough that you think, yeah, this guy would be okay at Sam in the NFL. And then the rest of them, you just have to kind of guess on traits. So it's interesting. And honestly, Owe is one of the guys who would have showed up as a good potential for a Sam linebacker, giving his overall athleticism.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it goes to show too, like how valuable Tyus Bowser is to his team, and also how great of a contract he has. That extension is just, there are team friendly deals, and then there are ones where you don't need to restructure. You don't need to do anything because that thing is too perfect and you don't want to touch it. You don't want to make him unhappy at all because, getting him, I think, 4 for 24 during the Judon off season when he was getting his deal from the Patriots. That seemed like a right player, right price type of Ravens deal that we have certainly reaped the benefits from. And shame he got injured at the end of the 2021 season, but great to have him back last year as a Sam. Yeah,
he signed through 24, so they're gonna have another decision point coming up with him. But he's certainly one of the very key pieces on the defense, and hopefully he has another big year there. Totally, makes unnecessary any thinking about whether you go ahead with 24 or not. There's about a $5.5 million savings. The Ravens are always going to be in a position where they're looking to save money on the margin, and players like Ronnie Stanley at $8.3 million next year. I sure as hell hope they don't let him go, but every opportunity to save money is going to be a big deal.
Yeah. I don't know if you want to start the backup tackle discussion yet, or if we already touched on that enough.
I think we've already touched on it enough, but let's maybe outline it just a little bit more. Is that Ronnie Stanley is so critically important to this team in terms of health, and there's a few players that would hurt a ton if you lost them, but maybe you could get by. And maybe even Marcus Williams fits into that role because Geno Stone was so good, in terms of coming in. But there's other players, and I hate to say it, but maybe Mark Andrews with the current receiving core is a guy you could afford to lose for 6 games, and the 2 backup tight ends would give you enough to get you through, along with whatever Monken could scheme up there. But I don't see any way you can get by without Ronnie Stanley on this team. I think that the drop off in play is going to be so prodigious that it would be a enormous problem. And so he's a guy that you can't afford not to have him in 24 as well as 23. Reports are good in terms of his health. Let's hope he plays at a good level. But boy, if he didn't for any reason, if we all of a sudden find out like that he's pretty much done at left tackle, it's a major project for the Ravens to find the replacement there.
Major project. Cannot express how valuable he is to the team and the team's success. And I mean, last offseason, I don't want to be as dramatic to say that his health was maybe the most important thing going into the Ravens season, but it sure was in the top 1 or 2. And it's the same this year. And I hope that he's put that behind him, and he's back to the Ronnie Stanley of old. And he played like it last year. He was, when he came back, it seemed like he was physically ready. And I know people were frustrated that it, took till week 5, but I'm of the opinion when it comes to Ronnie Stanley practicing and what his training camp role needs to be, that bubble wrap might be the Ravens' best option rather than getting him through the camp grind. Because we can talk about John Simpson being an ideal backup left tackle, or you could plug McCary in there, but the fact of the matter is that when they have Ronnie Stanley there, it's a completely different team, completely different offense and who you trust. And in my mind, I would, if he's healthy this year, I would look to extend him again rather than play any games for 2024. I understand that injury at one point was career threatening, but it's really hard to find left tackles. They don't come around often, and it's a shame that ours was shelved for an extended time. But he's too valuable to the offense, and a real pillar just to the Ravens' success for this year. And I would put him in. Obviously Lamar, but him and Humphrey are the two. If they lose either of those two, I'm not sure if the Ravens can recover from that.
Yeah. All right, Danny, outstanding job. Thanks for go through this with me. Just a very detailed. Obviously, you're extremely well prepared in terms of what you did for this. Tell folks where they can talk football with you online.
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter at djoseph0815. Just excited for Ravens training camp. I'll be listening to your recaps. I always look forward to those every training camp, and hopefully reading what your discussions are with fans. But excited for the preseason. Excited for Ravens football. Mainly excited that the main thing won't be the Lamar Jackson contract this preseason, and we can see how these guys are growing and developing. And I'm very bullish on this team. I'm very, very excited for this season.
All right. Outstanding, Danny. Thanks again for coming on. Other folks out there who would like to be on a film study short, just hit me up with your idea, DM on Twitter. We're starting to get to a point where there's less opportunity to do this, but there's always about one show per week I like to do that's a film study short, and would love to hear from you. I promise to get back to you very quickly. Danny, thanks again for coming on.
Thanks, Ken.
And we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.